do I make sure it's going to download? I'd be embarrassed if it didn't.
I think it just gives you the opportunity to add.
Invite to join. Yo. Did you see?
Yeah.
I think that's it, right?
Looks good.
Right.
I'm hope you can hear it well.
If not, it's not.
Declaring my
Okay,
own
cool.
slate. My slate is the slate for the people by the people.
I think it's a lake lot.
The only thing I will do, the only thing I'm my candidacy.
You're also on the commission.
I will get a McDonald's back into the Oakland Center.
You're on the commission, right? So the whole first thing starts.
Why not? A Burger King enjoyer in my midst, I won't have a beat. It sucks. That's what about Burger King.
Okay, actually, no, I'm a Burger King hater now. I'm a Burger King defender for a long time. They got rid of the chicken. Chicken is the best fast food chicken sandwich. By miles. 5 miles. Every other one was here. The chicken was here. Well, that's not true. Popeye was here. It's a lot. That's a lot.
Sit up in the section there.
It's like I haven't been to Chick-fil-A. I just know of Chick-fil-A.
I'm just gonna sit.
I've been to like 4 Chick-fil-A's, which is in my area. There was 0 Chick-fil-A's, and now in the span of 4 years, 3 got constructed within a 30-minute radius or so.
I submitted photos of inflammatory millions. No.
Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the 2023 ousc Vice Presidential Debate. I'm glad to see you all here. We have 2 candidates that will be debating today about a variety of issues, concerning Oakland University. We'll be going for about an hour and a half. For those that don't know me, my name is Jeremy Johnson. I'm a member of ousc, the Director of Executive Platform. Full disclosure, I've worked with both of these two on a variety of projects and programs before, but I promise to remain neutral and act only as a guide for the debate today. A quick explanation of the rules before we get into it. Each candidate is going to have a 1-minute opening statement after I introduce both of them. After questions are asked, candidates will have 1 minute to respond, and I'll have a 30-second rebuttal if they're specifically named in the answer of another candidate. If you need me to repeat a question, just let me know. I can do so. A timer is placed in front of candidates right here. This isn't answers, so I'm not feeding them. This is merely a timer so they can keep track of how much time they have remaining. Candidates may respond to what their opponent said, even if they're not called on. Just raise your hand and I'll let you do so. Make sure not to speak over each other. I encourage you to do this. We're here to see the difference between you two, so feel free to interject if you like. At times, I may follow up with a follow-up question if I feel as though something needs clarification, but I'll just retain responsibility over that. We'll start with some pre-planned questions based on student polling that we did over the last week. And after that, we will get into some other sections that we have planned for you all. I asked the audience to keep applause and cheering and all of that to a minimum so we can get through every topic. But without further ado, I'll introduce the candidates to you. So first, on my right, we have Ms. Ferguson. She is a human resources management major with a minor in sociology. She's currently a 3rd-year student and a chair of the Student Activities Funding Board. Additionally, she's a member of the Honors College, Business Honors Program, Swifties of OU, Girl Games, Grizzlies for Choice, Society for Human Resource Management, OU Friends Club, and Women in Business. On the other side is Amir Mitchell. Amir is a freshman pursuing an engineering major with a minor in marketing and Spanish. He's a current ousc legislator. He is a member of the Honors College, a CMI affiliate, and he's a new member of the Sigma Pi fraternity. So, without further ado, we'll get into opening statements. Ms. Ferguson, you'll start with 1 minute on the clock.
Hi, I'm Maris, and like many of you, I've seen the good that OUSC can do. Myself personally, in my sophomore year, I was able to see the cost of my textbooks reduced as a direct result of the Trash the Textbooks campaign. And this is one of the things that inspired me to join OUSC, and upon joining, I realized we did so much more than just textbooks. Once I joined, I saw initiatives like the free menstrual products across campus. I saw us join together and organize against East Campus development. And I also saw how we came to support our communities on campus and give everybody a voice and representation through Heritage Weeks. And I'm here ready to be your next student body VP to continue and expand this fight, because no one on this campus should have to sit in a classroom and think about where the nearest exits are. Because all campus food should be quality and affordable. Because everyone should have a place on this campus. And most importantly, because the skyrocketing tuition every year has to stop. Thank you.
Okay, now we will turn to Mr. Mitchell, your 1 minute opening statement.
How's it going, guys? I'm Amir Mitchell, Vice President candidate, freshman here at Oakland. Gonna keep this very short and simple. As I don't have very much debate experience, I'll start off with that. I'm just a person who's very passionate about change at the school. Being in several different organizations involved in different majors and minors throughout this year, I've had a ton of experience working with this wonderful administration and furthering goals to support our students. And I think that's the biggest thing that's very important to me is helping our students. So that's why I'm here. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you both for that. Just a reminder for everybody in the audience, we have QR codes that are stationed around the habitat right now. If you want to ask a question, we'll be reading off questions from the audience and the OU community later on in the debate. But let's get to our first topic, which is general experience for the job. So there's 2 of you running for the position of Vice President this year. For each of you, I want you to tell us, the audience, about the experience you have for this position and why you're the right person for the job as opposed to your competitor. Mr. Mitchell, we'll start with you. 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, I am a freshman, so a lot of people say, well, why you? Why a freshman who comes to Oakland University in his second semester? And what I say is, this might be my first college experience, but I have a ton of experience abroad. I've lived in the Dominican Republic for over a year. I know Spanish. I'm in tap with all different communities. I come from a less financial appropriate family that kind of came up and we had our adversities there. And through this school, I've worked with OUSC on several different initiatives, on every single task force, and if I have the time, I work on it. And I've made sure to make that I have a very good amount of respect and amount of integrity when it comes to this job, because I do take it seriously, and I believe that I would be a solid candidate for this. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Ferguson, same question. Tell us about your experience and why you were the right person for the job. 1 minute on the clock.
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that my experience in SAFB and OUSC together have been really formative in my experiences engaging with the student body. I work with student orgs every single day, which means I'm interacting with students constantly. And so I'm able to be in tune with them, listen to their needs, adapt quickly, and make sure that their voices are heard. I'm also aware of how OUSC works, and on our state we have a ton of experience as well. So, I've had my hand in writing legislation, and that's something that SAFB chairs haven't really previously been engaged in. And so, really being an advocate through OUSC is something that I found a lot of passion for. And so I think first and foremost what needs to be experienced for this is that, I've been in touch with students, and also I'm an advocate and an activist at heart, and this is a huge part of who I am as a person.
Okay. Let's talk about some questions that are specific to being the vice president. So one main job of being the vice president is to manage the legislature and run the meetings. My question is, how would you best prepare for this job, and what would you do to improve the legislature compared to the current session of Congress? Ms. Ferguson, you'll have the first answer with 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, so with my experience in SAFB, I've already been managing a staff of my own. Also with my experience in human resource management, I've been nothing but prepared this whole time of receiving my education for managing staff, whether that's recruitment, onboarding, retention, all those kinds of things. And so first and foremost, something that I improved when I first got to SAFB was our onboarding, because there wasn't really a structure for how to train people when they get into this job. And so that was my number one goal there, and that's going to be my number one goal in this position as well. I want to make sure that the process is smooth because we have a lot of legislators. Luckily, this era of OUSC, we have a lot of engagement from students. And so we want to make sure that the process for getting them in and getting their voices heard as soon as possible, getting them trained and equipped to do their jobs, that's my first goal.
Okay, Mr. Mitchell, same question to you. How would you best prepare for the job of Vice President, and what would you do to improve the current legislature compared to the current session of Congress?
Yeah, so I'd like to say first that I have an immense amount of experience, especially with business, managing teams, coordinating tasks and things like that. I've been in the restaurant industry for over 10 years now, so I definitely have an immense amount of experience and background with working with people, with getting tasks done, getting the things properly, and how I would be a better vice president. I think is to completely stay neutral, to work with our legislature, to not isolate people, and to make sure that everyone feels like they are welcome. Everyone feels like they have a space safe, a space, here in OUSC to conduct their initiatives and resolutions and things like that.
Ms. Ferguson, 30-second response.
I have to say I wholeheartedly agree with the idea of bringing in students from all different backgrounds to represent their voices. A great strength of our Congress recently has been that we are such a large body, and so this gives us the capacity to represent all sorts of students. And so, I definitely agree that all student voices should be heard, whether people agree with them or not, because it's important to represent all viewpoints and give students a voice to speak for themselves and not speak over them.
Okay, let's stick with the topic of being the vice president. Building off of that previous question, a key job of vice president is the training of new legislators. You're the main person that runs point on this. How would you best manage that responsibility? Let's start with Mr. Mitchell, 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, so we had a ton of new fresh faces to this year. I came in during the summer along with Ms. Ferguson, and I do believe that over this year we've grown a ton. We've seen a lot of new people, and we've had so much new diversity that I am such a huge supporter of. And I believe that I would work with these people to not see differences or anything like that. I would bring everybody closer. I would see where's our common ground. I don't care what your political background is or how you feel about things personally. What we're here for is to change things at this school. And so what I believe is to bring everybody closer and work with them every day to make sure that we have a stronger legislature.
Okay, Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. How would you manage the responsibility of training new legislators as the vice president? 1 minute.
Yeah, so making sure everybody's equipped to do their job with the tools necessary is incredibly important, if not the most important job of the vice president. And so I would say that to make sure that training is effective, we need to all look at it together as a team and say, what do we need from our legislators, and how can we give them the tools to do that? One primary goal and duty of the job of a legislator is to read and write legislation and then vote on it. And we need to empower our legislative body to give them the tools that they need to know how to write those pieces of legislation so they can make true change. It's one thing to talk about it and do things here and there, but if we can make policy and if we can enact this legislation, it really gives power to our voices. It's not just us saying wishes out there. It's giving power to people and putting the power directly into students' hands.
Okay, let's move on to some more specific issues facing OU right now. A lot of these questions were determined based on the student polling that we've done, and our first topic is food and dining on campus. In our polling with more than 150 students, 26% of them indicated that campus food and dining is their #1 issue. What do you see as the major challenges for food on campus, and what will you do both in the legislature and with the president to address these concerns? Ms. Ferguson, you'll go first, 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, I can start out to say I think we all agree that the quality of food on campus and our dining experience is less than satisfactory, if not downright disappointing. And it's important that we keep these conversations going with Chartwells and holding them accountable and saying that because we're paying so much to be here and support them, they need to support us just equally if not superior. And so one of the first things that we need to address here is affordability. The prices for campus food are exorbitant, and not to mention when you pay for a housing dining plan, most of your meal items might go unused and expired, and there's no cost that we get back from that. And additionally, the hours need to be expanded so that way we can increase accessibility to food on campus so students aren't going hungry just because they can't get there at a certain hour of the day. And finally, we need to enact Swipe Out Hunger to make sure that meal swipes can be donated, at the very least if we can't use them, to students in need across campus.
Okay, Mr. Mitchell, same question to you. What do you see as the major issues for food on campus, and what will you do both with legislators and the president to address these concerns?
Yeah, so as an on-campus student, I eat there every day. So you'll never guess where I'm going after this. I'm very passionate about that. That's why one of the biggest things in ousc's I've started is our Chartwell's Task Force, is meeting with them every bi-weekly, bringing in executives in the office, saying, how can we do better with this? I know, you guys are losing money, or there are alternatives that aren't exactly practical that we'd like. We would love you guys to have every single amenity here for food for us, but we understand what is practical for us. And so what we work with them is one thing that we laid the track for is meeting with them, setting those meetings up, getting those people in the room, and allowing us to do things such as Swipe Out Hunger, such as expanding dining hours, adding alternative hot food in the Hive and Tilly's, and just getting better alternative situations that are practical and works for everyone. Thank you.
Okay. 30-second response, Ms. Ferguson.
I will also add that I've been lucky enough to serve on the Chartwell's Task Force as well. And in doing so, I've been able to participate in meetings with Chartwells and hold them accountable for their actions, specifically as it relates to student organizations. As I know, costs can be very expensive, and also there have been issues with them charging late fees, and just the process for ordering is not easy. And so being able to stick up for student organizations is a unique quality that I've had in this approach with Chartwells. And I know that after we met with Chartwells, when I was part of the conversation, changes started happening immediately after that, and that was really interesting.
It's 30 seconds. Let's move on to the topic of the Student Activities Funding Board. The adequate funding of student organizations is something you both mentioned in your platforms, and it seems to be an issue for this election. First, Ms. Ferguson, you're the chair of SAFP. Tell us about your experience as chair and what you would like the relationship between OUSC and SAFP to look like if you're to be elected. 1 minute on the clock.
So I know there are a lot of anecdotal issues with SAFP, and honestly my heart hurts for those organizations that are still struggling. And I know as a student org leader how important it is that we all get this funding because it's vital to keeping our organizations alive. Also, as an SAFP leader, I know that it's important to keep all organizations on an equal playing field when it comes to funding so that those that are doing their due diligence are getting the funding they deserve. What I can tell you is this. In the past year, SAFP has allocated and used more funding than in the past 4 years. There is more funding available now for organizations to request than there ever has been in the history of SAFP. And because of this administration, those increases have happened. And we've also created the Special Projects Fund, which has allowed students to participate in advocacy across campus. And we're not stopping there. We plan to increase organizational funding by $1,000 every single semester for every organization. We plan to increase the Special Projects funding by $500 every organization every semester. Not only that, but we plan to dust off those old bylaws and simplify them so that way they're readable and accessible.
All right, Mr. Mitchell, similar question to you. You're not a member of SAFP, yet you still talk about the funding of student organizations within your platform. What would you want the relationship between OUSC and SAFP to be if you are elected to vice president? 1 minute.
Yeah, I believe the influence that OUSC has had on SAFP has been, to say politely, inappropriate. I think that organizations do need a common playing field, and they have made bylaws to accommodate for them. And I appreciate this administration for the small things that they've done to help these organizations. But when we look at the specific cases of vetoes going by, they talk about the amount of money that's available. Yes, because of COVID. I see why do we have an excess of a couple $100,000 saved up that things are not being allocated properly. In my opinion, I believe these need to be completely separate, with no influence and no personal relations or bias towards these organizations. And I think everyone should have the equal opportunity to get funding as an organization here at Oakland.
Okay, that's an interesting point you bring up, is the total separation of SAFP from OUSC. Ms. Ferguson, of course, again, chair of SAFP. I'll give you 1 minute to respond. Should SAFP be separated from student congress?
I think it's important to realize the role that OUSC plays with SAFB. They are very separate entities. The factor that OUSC has over SAFB is that it is the legislative body. So this means that it holds accountability over SAFB. So if there are cases when SAFB is becoming out of control or needs to be reined in, this is what OUSC's job is. The legislative body is meant to hold SAFB accountable. And so, frankly, I don't understand how the separation of OUSC and SAFB would help any kind of bias situation happening in SAFB, because frankly, this is what OUSC is meant to do. It's meant to hold SAFB accountable. And so, with that, it can't be separated.
Mr. Mitchell, I'll give you 1 minute to respond to Ms. Ferguson. Same question.
Yeah, I believe, SAFB should 100% be held accountable. And there has to be someone who puts them, kind of, here's the line, this is what it is, and they're being monitored as far as like what's going on, what's being received. I absolutely agree. What I don't agree with is having, our president sitting in meetings, funding meetings, budget approvals, and having an inappropriate amount of influence towards these organizations who just want to do what their hobbies are. I think that the fact that certain organizations have gotten bypasses and have gotten waiver releases and things that have been inappropriate are just not true. I think these things should be addressed. I think these things should be brought up, and these organizations should be also asking these questions. Well, why did they get this and we don't get these bypasses? Why are we held so strictly? And why are these regulations so tight on our organizations? Are you?
Ms. Ferguson, 30 seconds.
So the reason why it's important for it to be connected is because OUSC is a voting body, clearly. So the student body has direct input on who represents them in OUSC. And so this brings in student body influence over SAFB. And additionally, the comments about Mr. Romano being in budget hearings, he is actually an ex officio member of our board, and so that would be completely appropriate for him to be there. As well as being my supervisor and I'm a direct report of his, it would be more than appropriate for him to oversee my actions.
Okay. Moving on from SAFB, let's talk about reproductive rights and resources on campus, something you also both mentioned in your platforms. With the overturning of Roe versus Wade last summer, reproductive rights has become a major issue for students on both sides of the political aisle. My question for you both is, does OUSC have a role in protecting and providing for reproductive rights? And if so, how? Mr. Mitchell, let's go to you first. 1 minute.
Yeah, as an advocate for all students here, I definitely see, a big a call for help for people who need reproductive resources. When I heard about Roe v. Wade, I'll be completely honest, I saw somebody screaming at the sky, and I said, what just happened? They said, we lost. I said, who? They said, women. And, immediately I was heartbroken, that hurt me. And I said, well, what can we do? And immediately, I got to thinking, and we proposed the Plan B initiative to make sure, hey, do you guys understand these resources are available? We just did a handbook. 90% of the student leaders didn't know that, Plan B is available for $15 in the Grant Health Center. And these resources were just not available. And, well, they didn't know that it was. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody understands that, these things are here. And as far as advocating for things that, would help. Please.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. Does Student Congress have a role in protecting and providing for reproductive rights? And if so, how? 1 minute.
I think the Student Congress is responsible for advocating for all student needs across the board, and so I think reproductive rights absolutely falls under this category. I also believe that supporting women goes beyond just what happens in our bodies and our reproductive systems, and so this is why I'm supporting the creation of a Women's Resource Center that is all-encompassing beyond just reproductive rights, but also to include things like, what women experience in the world professionally, educationally, socially. And so, things like our menstrual product initiative is one example of how we've supported so far. We can take this so much further, supporting women when they need mentorship and when they're experiencing discrimination and sexism. And, there's all kinds of social issues we experience as women in particular that aren't seen on this campus through an institutionalized program.
In a similar vein, you guys want 30-second response, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with that. I think that's one big thing that our administration would love to work towards is making sure that we expand our Grant Health Center so women can receive adequate support while going through pregnancies or any women-related issues as far as gynecology or anything like that. And I think it is our role to make sure that these resources are advocated for.
Ms. Ferguson, 30 seconds.
I'd like to add that I just don't think that it's adequate enough to talk about women and supporting women's needs only in a reproductive sense, because our needs don't start and stop when a child is involved, or when we're able to reproduce, or when a man might be affected by the consequences. And so we have to go further than that, and it's not acceptable to start advocating for women in only reproductive ways. It has to go further.
Okay. Let's talk about the topic of inclusion. A lot of students noted that inclusion and being inclusive on campus is fairly important. And as was stated before, a major role of the vice president is to lead the legislature. What specific actions can students expect from you if you're elected? Will you take to include the concerns and voices from marginalized groups, but not only groups involved in the majority? Mr. Mitchell, let's start with you.
I think the biggest thing that we advocate for is communication. When these lines of communication are ripped away and there is an isolation between OUSC and these student organizations, their voices doesn't get heard. I'd like to represent that we used to have a Greek life advocate, a representative. We used to have an athletics representative. And we used to have these people that came to our meetings, such as RLA representatives. They don't come because they don't feel their voices are heard. I'll say that.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. If you're elected, what can we expect you to do? Specific actions to include the voices of marginalized groups. 1 minute on the clock.
Absolutely. I think that building relationships across campus, whether it's with students or organizations that support and advocate for students, that's the best way that we can show up for DEI. And I think one of the ways that we've proven that we can do that is through distribution of pride pins across campus, over 6,000, implementation of inclusive food policies and font policies, things of that nature. The implementation of heritage weeks, we've done it all. And so we're going to push it further than that and keep going with our support for these communities. And additionally, something to bring up about our Congress is it's important that we have representation from all sorts of groups across campus. And being inclusive in the student body is, I think, first and foremost important. And additionally, it's important to recognize that if other candidates are elected, the best case scenario is that there are 3 women in the Congress. 3. And that does not represent the 58% of women on this campus.
Mr. Mitchell, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I definitely believe this is very good, and I'd love to kind of talk about, communication. I'll say, as majority freshmen, a lot of people look and say, freshmen, really? Freshmen? What do you know about this school? And so I'll say, firstly, we don't have all the answers. But the best thing we can do is sit down here and meet with these organizations, with these departments, and say, how can we help? Get the answers and carry it out.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the topic of sustainability. In the past few years, sustainability at an administrative level has become a bigger topic of discussion for just about everybody on campus. Yet at the same time, many in our administration believe that sustainability might begin and end with merely planting trees. In your words, what does sustainability mean to you? How would you define it? And what should its relationship to OU be? Ms. Ferguson, we'll start with you. 1 minute.
Sustainability is of the absolute utmost importance to me. It's personal. It's our future. And, even though we may be just individuals here, as a university we're bigger, as a state we're bigger, as a country we're bigger, as a world we're bigger. And it's important that we advocate for ourselves and our future. And so we've already started doing this through great collaborations and relationships with student organizations and larger university organizations surrounding sustainability on this campus. And we've provided infrastructural support to historically underfunded areas within this, and we plan to continue doing so. Additionally, our work against the East Campus development is a primary objective of our last administration, and that same kind of passion is something that we plan to bring forward. Mobilizing our community in that way was extremely powerful. Personally, I experienced the protests and writing letters to the editor and being in meetings, fighting for that, and so that's something that really lights our fire, and is something we plan to move forward with in this administration.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell, same question to you. Give us your definition of sustainability. How do you view sustainability? And what should its relationship with OU be? 1 minute on the clock.
say something along the lines of what Ms. Ferguson said, that it is investing in our future. I think sustainability is very important to us, but however, I'll say that I have an experience with sustainability. I'll come out right and say that. I'll say that I came into a school where our director of sustainability has done the absolute best that she possibly could to make sure our students are held to the gold recycle policy, making sure that our faculty and staff are going about things responsibly, sustainably, in reference to Chartwell's, what they do with their food. Is it composted? Is it thrown away? These are good questions we love to ask, and when we hire a director of sustainability, I want them to have the same qualities that we work with as our current director. And I think that we would love to echo the sentiments of what they've done and follow in their footsteps, because I will say they have done an excellent job.
Ms. Ferguson, 30-second response.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think the efforts surrounding sustainability has been fantastic this year. I will also say that 4% of our tuition goes towards energy costs at this university. That is a very significant portion. So that's why we're also advocating to increase energy efficient appliances across campus and encourage the university to retrofit old and new buildings with proper up-to-date standards regarding energy efficiency to save our tuition money and better utilize it where we need it.
Let's move on to the topic of managing your relationship with administration. So a major challenge for any student congress will be managing that relationship. Sometimes administration can be a major help for getting things done. Other times they can be the major obstacle. If you're elected, how do you intend to manage this relationship that you'll have with administration? Mr. Mitchell, let's start with you one more.
Yeah, I'll also say, coming in as a freshman first semester, I'll say that there were a lot of things that I'd like to change about this school. And I was a little dissatisfied with the current state. And I considered transferring. But you want to know the reason I stayed? Was because of our administration. The way they've worked with OUSC is unlike any other school. When I took a trip and I saw all the different representatives from across the country talk about how they fight with their administration and how they push back on everything, and they're the main brick barricade from them getting change done, I said, let me think about mine. We do not have that. I think our administration works well with OUSC, and they help further initiatives to see what can we do for students. When we say this is important, they say, yeah, we agree, what can we do? And so, as Vice President, I would love to just continue that work with our administration and faculty and carry out those initiatives.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. How will you manage that relationship with administration? 1 minute.
I think so far in my experiences, remaining professional and open-minded is really important when coming to these discussions. I also know that it's not always possible to be buddy-buddy 100% of the time. At the end of the day, it's Student Congress's job to advocate for students and hear our voices and make everyone else's voices heard. And so sometimes that does result in a little bit of conflict. I have to say that a big strength of mine, I think, is managing conflict and remaining calm and composed and working through that to find the solutions that are best for this university and for our students. And so, at the end of the day, if we have to push administration, we're going to, and we have. And, it's okay if there's some conflict sometimes. It is, even though it feels uncomfortable. But first and foremost, it's a primary responsibility to make sure we have the relationships around campus, but it's also important that we get stuff done.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the topic of safety. Did you want to respond? 30-second response.
Yeah, I'd like to echo those sentiments. I think that, administration, they have been great, but there has been things that we'll disagree with. And I think, as long as OUC and Oakland University exists, there will be conflict. And I believe to have certain leaders in place to stand their ground as well is very important. I think that if we are passionate about something and the university administration doesn't agree, let's do it ourselves. What can we do? We'd like your help, but we don't need it. I yield.
Let's move on now to the topic of safety on campus. Students throughout the entire year have expressed concerns for their own safety and well-being while on OU's campus, especially following concerning events from previous the academic year, as well as the tragic shooting that occurred at Michigan State University recently, just a couple of months ago. What will your administration do to address these safety issues? And what are the top issues you think are contributing to this sense of unease? Ms. Ferguson, let's start with you 1 minute on the clock.
I think this issue is personal for every person in this room. There's no doubt that we were all affected when we heard about the news at MSU. And thankfully I was able to be a part of the group that came together and put together the vigil for that MSU shooting. And it was incredibly powerful to feel the energy in that room. And, you know, it proves to us that students care about safety, and that's why we have plans. We have plans to implement better security measures across campus, updating them and actually utilizing them when our tuition money pays for them. This will allow our university to lock down if and when there is a safety threat on campus, rather than just sitting around and waiting for things to go wrong. I also believe that we should have reformations to our medical amnesty policy to protect survivors and allow students to feel empowered in seeking help rather than being punished. I also believe there should be somebody in the position for emergency manager on this campus. When things do go wrong, we have a plan. There should be increased training opportunities for students to have these safety measures put in place, and also we need more blue lights in academic buildings.
Mr. Mitchell, same question to you. What would you do if elected to address safety concerns at OU? 1 minute.
Yeah, I think our meeting with the chief of police was very fruitful. I think we got a lot of good answers on the safety about this school, and we're able to pose questions to the administration and the police department as to why certain things aren't enacted, such as when we were living, you know, in our resident halls and we heard about an active shooter and the doors were completely unlocked and they could have just waltzed right in. We saw that as a huge problem, and that's why me and President Goichai, or potential President Goichai, we sat down, we read a resolution, we said, how can we help? How can we help out with protecting our students? And not just that, how can we help make our students feel safe? It's not just about locking the doors or making sure that we respond well, it's about making sure our students aren't harassed or profiled, and that every student here is protected and feels safe by their police and administration.
Okay. Let's talk briefly about the cost of college. More than 50% of students we polled indicated that the cost of college is their number one issue. It's more than 50%. Generally speaking, what are some of the policies that you would support to reduce the cost of college, the cost of attendance at Oakland University? Mr. Mitchell, we'll start with you. 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, I'll say that the current administration has done a great job with their book policy and helping convert textbooks to make them cheaper and cost a lot less than these new editions that they're making our students buy. I think that's a very big thing, but we do have to face the reality of that, yes, we do have an endowment, but since COVID, Oakland University, housing's been down, enrollment's been down. A lot of our administration, we have had so many budget cuts across the board that have made it that much harder for us to work on making costs a little cheaper. As much as we would like to, I think it starts with making this university the place where students want to be. Students don't want to just go to class. They can show up and actually engage in their environment in several different ways and organizations. I think those things make students want to come here, because personally, I would love to be in a place where that I feel welcomed and that I believe I can make change and carry out things that I believe.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. What are some general things that we can do to reduce the cost of college at Oakland University? 1 minute.
First and foremost, tuition is a huge problem. It's been going up year by year with no sign of stopping. And a large reason for this is because the state actually gives us the lowest allocation as a university. And so in the past, we have lobbied to get this increase successfully, and we will continue to do so that way the burden can be off of students and put back into the state. Some examples of programs that we've done that we will continue to do is the Trash Textbooks campaign, which actually it's projected that just one of our courses that we were able to convert is going to save students $60,000 or around $60,000 every semester. We also plan to support the food pantry for those students in need of starving hunger. And we are also going to encourage professors to actually use the resources that we pay for, like Moodle, rather than additionally paid courses like Cengage and Wiley and what have you. We will also push for energy efficiency, and we believe that your education should empower you rather than financially cripple you.
Okay. Those are all the pre-prepared questions that we had for both of you. About a week ago, I emailed you both asking both of you to prepare questions for each other, and that's the section we'll turn to now. Candidates will have a question for each other about any issue you think deserves attention at Oakland University. The candidate you ask will have 1 minute to respond, and you will have another 1 minute to respond to that answer. And we can have a back and forth going if that's what you both choose to do, as long as we're not speaking over each other. So we'll start with Ms. Ferguson, your question for Mr. Mitchell.
So, in the course of this campaign and on your platform, I
Mr. Mitchell, 1 minute.
Yeah, I'll say that I am not a part of any other organizations outside of OUSC. I don't have any organizations that receive budget funding, so I don't have the experience. But what I do is I do have ears, and I do hear my students, and I listen to my peers about what goes on, what happened with certain things like balls and piping rows, several different examples that people feel isolated, feel like the regulations do not support them. And I would work to make sure that these things are separate, they're overlooked but separate, there's no influence, and that things are going about appropriately.
Ms. Ferguson, 1 minute for a response to that answer.
All right, so I'd just like to clarify in your response that I didn't hear that you would read a bylaw, I didn't hear that you would see the forms. Any of those things I think would be important in your planning to make changes to SAFB. It's important to do more than just hear and listen. That's only part of the job. The rest is to implement solutions, and we've already gone over solutions, but it's clear that knowing SAFB like I do inside and out, I know what we have to do to go through these bylaws. I understand them, and I understand where the students are being barriers, and I know how we're going to fix it. And so I think it's important to address that you can't just listen, because you have to have the expertise and you have to have the ability to look for the solutions, even if you aren't experienced. I don't understand how you could not read the bylaws when you're trying to fight against these bylaws.
Mr. Mitchell, 1 minute response.
I'll definitely say that I have not personally read the bylaws. I'll be transparent about that. I'll say that I do not work for SAFB as a staff member. However, in OUSC, I do see things as far as the budget. I do see, the amount of applications and denials that go out. I do understand that there is a upward of organizations that reach out to us. And I think if everyone is yelling at us saying that we don't understand these complex rules, how could they be further conveyed? I don't think it's my responsibility to have just kind of take on that role as chair. I don't think I have a good solid answer for them. I would love to separate things and make sure we work with them and make those things appropriate, and make sure that these organizations understand what it takes to get this funding, because a lot of them are personally fed up with the way that things have gone about.
Ms. Ferguson, 1 minute.
I would like to say that as a legislator, it's your job to read and approve or deny bills, one of which was the approval of the SAFB bylaws as they stand. So I just like to say that if it's your job to read and make decisions, voting decisions, I do think it would be the responsible choice to actually read through these documents rather than blindly voting. I would also say that we're reading these complaints, and our state is actually endorsed publicly so far by 16 organizations here on campus, and with more to come. I'm curious where the orgs are, because I know there are issues, and I've heard them, and we're working on solving them. We have solved several already. But I'm wondering where are these student orgs, because they're coming to us and they're supporting us. And I understand there are still issues to tackle, and they're ready to tackle them, but I'm just not really seeing it other than a couple of outstanding issues, all of which are followed the post of the bylaws, which you would know if you had read them. But every single denial, every decision we make comes along with an explanation, and so there's always a reason behind everything that's always communicated.
Mr. Mitchell, response, 1 minute.
Yes, I'll say simply that as a legislator, when we do go by these certain bills from SAFB, including the bylaws, we do a quick scroll through and voice read of some things there. I don't think we've, it is my responsibility to go through and do that, and I'll say that I have been negligent to look through, every word. But I will say that it is also the responsibility of the chair to educate these organizations to make sure that they have the adequate resources and understanding to get proper approval, rather than insist a bias towards organizations who don't understand, and there's been a reluctance to help. You.
Ms. Ferguson, 1 minute response.
I've personally taken a huge load on myself to make myself available to student organizations that may be struggling or have questions. In fact, I've reached out personally to every organization that did not receive a successful approval in the fall semester, and made sure I offered my time to them and an explanation for any kind of questions they may have had, and we continue to do so. In fact, I hired a position specifically for this reason. I also think that it's interesting to say it was just a quick read over, so always providing a document for a bill. Also, I'm curious as to what's the plan? If SAFB and OUSC are separated, what is the plan for accountability?
Mr. Mitchell, 1 minute response.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, I'll say again, we do not have all the answers for how we're going to go about every step of the way. I think it's important that we listen to our organizations. I think it's important that they understand, how to receive these fundings. And I would work very closely to understand all the bylaws and how we can reform these things to better work for our students and organizations. I think the greatest goal here and the reason why we're standing on the stage is because we want what's better for students and organizations. I yield.
Ms. Ferguson, I'll give you last word since this is your question. 1 minute on the clock.
I will say that as a legislator, it is your job to listen to these students' voices, and I appreciate you doing so. I also recognize it's your job to bring those concerns to people that can make change. As the SAFB chair, I know I'm able to make changes on SAFB and help the system that way. So I'm curious, since we've been in the same office this entire time, why you've never asked me an SAFB question, never brought a student concern to me until it's in the election cycle, in which case we've never even worked on it. Even through this election cycle, the only time you've had something to say about it is when it's public, and when you're wanting to complain and get some traction on this election. So I don't really think that that's appropriate. I also think that it's negligent to your job. If you really are hearing these complaints, then you haven't brought them to me.
Mr. Mitchell, let's turn to your question for Ms. Ferguson. I'll give you 1 minute.
Yeah, over the past year that I've been here, I think that OUSC has done a great job with advocating for sustainability, food security, and a lot of issues among the students. I think you guys have done an excellent job at advocating. But I'll ask you this, what is one weakness that you think OUSC has struggled with to help their students with, or a problem on campus? What's the weakness?
Ms. Ferguson, I'll give you a minute to respond.
I think that's a great question. I think we've done a really great job of gathering a lot of support across campus for their student organizations, institutional organizations, what have you. Even in our own general body, we've done a fantastic job of getting new legislators and getting people into the conversations. And I think one of the best things that we can do to improve on this is to really just give them the tools, like you were saying earlier, give them the tools to do their jobs effectively and empower them to stand up for the things that they care about. And once they have these abilities and this strength within themselves to stand up and use their voice, we're going to be able to get even more done. And so empowering them to take on their own initiatives and, even just stepping beyond what they think that they're capable of and what they think that they're allowed to do, and just really pushing the boundaries and breaking down barriers of what we can do, and just giving them the power back and letting them take on the initiatives that they want to have.
Mr. Mitchell, 1 minute response.
So, just for clarification here, you're saying that the number one thing that is OUSC's weakness is giving students the proper resources to go about that?
Ms. Ferguson, 1 minute.
I wouldn't say a lack of resources. I would say that we could empower them better. I would say that we need to give them more confidence in themselves to stand up and use their voice, whether it's through a vote or whether it's through their actual voice, or whether it's through legislation creation, whether it's through making initiatives on campus, whether it's running events. All of these things, we need to give our legislation the confidence in themselves to do what they're there to do, because I know they've got the ideas in their head. I know they're valuable. I know that they have these great, powerful abilities to change this university. And I think giving them the strength to do it themselves is of utmost importance.
Mr. Mitchell? Let's move on to some individual questions I have for both of you. I have one for each of you. Ms. Ferguson, a major part of your platform has been dedicated to supporting activism on campus. As a group that's elected to represent the needs and the desires of the entire student body, what does this look like for Student Congress, and how is this approach potentially better than your opponents? 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, so even just within SAFB, something that we've done this year is create the Special Projects Fund. So this creates an opportunity for student organizations to participate in their own initiatives and give them the lead on those things. And so we've empowered them financially to take on advocacy that they may not have had access to or resources for otherwise. It's important for us to give students a voice because, like I said before, down to my heart, I'm an activist. I'm not here to be a politician. I'm not here to do just communication. I'm here to be an activist on this campus, and I think that stands strong for our whole slate. And I know that stands strong through our legislative body right now. We are all activists, and we're here to make changes on in this university. And that may look different across organizations and across students. But it's important to just empower people to have their own voices and to give them the resources they need to make those voices heard.
Mr. Mitchell, a different question for you. A main component of your platform is health and wellness. You mentioned working with the Graham Health Center to provide things like vaccines, therapy, etc., among other resources. What's your approach to promoting physical and mental health among the student body, and why is that better than your opponents? 1 minute.
I think physical health is very important, and we would like to expand the Graham Health Center and work with them to have adequate support, more staff to support more students. We also like to have an increased amount of providing health cares at the Graham Health Center. We understand that a lot of people would love to get a checkup or get a vaccine or something, but I think that the biggest issue is that they don't have the right health care, and I think that's a big problem as a university student when you go through all these adversities, that they have adequate support there. But not just physical, I think mental is very big too. As you guys know, there's 4 free sessions you get for counseling sessions. After that, that's your whole time at OU, maybe once a year. You go in and they kind of, out the door you go at that point. I think advocating for more free sessions, potentially making it unlimited so students don't have a number on how many concerns or issues they have coming to this campus.
Okay, let's move on to questions directly from the students and the community. We'll dedicate the last 40 minutes or so of the debate to this. These are questions that are submitted to us via Google form, which there's QR codes around the habitat right now. You can still submit questions. The form is still open. There will be a similar one for the presidential debate that's occurring tomorrow night. Some of these questions are for both candidates, some are for individual candidates. We gave them the option to choose. We may not be able to get to all of them, but we'll get through as many as we can. The first one is from an anonymous student for both of you. They say you have similar solutions to fix current issues on campus, but they want to know what is the main difference between your campaign and the campaign of your competitors. Mr. Mitchell, we'll start with you. 1 minute.
I'll say the reason why we have similar goals is because we've worked with each other for a year. It's honestly been a pleasure to work in front of these initiatives and resolutions with Oakland Student Congress. But I'll say the biggest thing that we've kind of bridged our path away from is communication and just acceptance. I think a lot of the time, personally, everyone in this, in my future potential administration has felt isolated by the current administration, and they have felt taken aback or thrown away. And there's been just a general smog that's just kind of festered, leading up to this our decision to want to be separate and come as freshmen to start a different administration. I think that's a very big thing about making sure our students and our legislators are feeling accepted in their place of work.
Ms. Ferguson, I'll turn the same question to you. What do you think the main difference is? 1 minute.
First and foremost, I certainly agree that everyone should feel accepted in our place of work, especially across this campus as well. I will say that our biggest difference would have to be our experience and our track record. We've made progress. We've had a lot of things done across this campus. In fact, we kind of joke about how hard it is to look around this campus and not see something that Student Congress is kind of part of. And so that's definitely something that we take a lot of pride in. I will say also that we've taken the time to really build a lot of quality relationships across this campus, but it's how we've been able to make so much of this stuff possible. And, it's exemplified in the work of this campus development. We have so many students, so many faculty members, so many community members come together for a cause, and it was an honor to be able to help organize that. And I think that's just really impactful and part of our experience is that building relationships and utilizing those relationships to get what we need for students.
At this time, I'll note that we are getting a lot of questions, which I'm glad to see, but I do need to stipulate that when I ask these questions, they do not reflect the views of the Elections Commission, nor my own views as moderator. Just so you all know, I'm just reading the questions off. The next question is, OU student asks for both of you. Some have called Chartwell's, also known as OU Eats, a monopoly on campus. Would you agree with that sentiment? Ms. Ferguson, we'll start with you 1 minute.
From a technical standpoint, yes. They're the only ones providing food on this campus, so from the definition, it is definitely a monopoly. And for that reason, you have to hold Chartwell's accountable, and making sure that we are getting the services that we demand, that we deserve, and that we pay for. And so it's important to make sure that we're having these meetings, and not only these meetings, but just publicly having this conversation of what we are paying for and expecting from them, and what we're not getting. And so, it's important that within this monopoly system, where there's only one provider, we have to put extra pressure on the situation. And we we have to make sure that they're keeping up with what we need. Otherwise, it's a huge downfall of this whole monopoly setup.
Mr. Mitchell, same question to you. Is Charlotte's a monopoly? 1 minute.
By contract, they are. They signed a 10-year deal here at the Oakland Center, making them the sole provider of food. If you get anything in this Oakland Center, it has to be in there. And I'm not sure if you guys know, I don't know how strict they enforce this, but if you can't bring outside food even into the Oakland Center, you can't go and, let's say you don't have the money to spend $10 on a meal here, and you go get, let's say a $5 pizza, and you bring it back, you could potentially be kicked out for going and getting a secondary solution. So I'll definitely say their eyes were definitely set on monopolizing this campus and having us as students be their only source of income as far as food, and there are no other options. If you look at the dining halls, if you look at the food court, if you look at catering, this is the only thing that is allowed here. So by definition, yes.
Next question, specifically for Mr. Mitchell. This is their claim. They say you are continuously piggybacking off the contributions of the Ferguson administration. I'm assuming the current administration of OUSC. They ask, what will you be doing differently than them to encourage students to vote for you on the ballot?
I'll definitely say that the Ferguson administration, they have some very good ideas. And I'll say the current administration, they've ran the show. And I'll definitely say as a freshman student, I didn't come in here and change everything by myself. And I think there was a learning curve. We had to come in and understand, well, what are bylaws, what are bills, what are resolutions? And there wasn't a learning curve, but I think at this moment in time it is crucial and pertinent that we understand that, not only that these things are laid by the Ferguson administration, we will say we have a lot of common ideas because we came up with them. And a lot of things that, we had as ideas or things like that were accounted for. And we definitely have made great change as freshman students, and we look to over the course of us being here. We'll be here for, years to come.
Okay. Ms. Ferguson, 30-second response.
I don't have that much to say other than that's false. I mean, it's clear. It's clear what we've been doing, and I think our track record speaks for itself. And there's no doubt that we couldn't have done a lot of things that we've done and that the previous administration has done without the support of the legislative body. And there have been a lot of things that they have taken the lead on themselves. And like I was saying before, we need to empower that. I also think it's just false that those are our ideas, our program.
Mr. Mitchell, 30 seconds.
I'll say definitely that there are some things that we would love to do better. When we look at what's isolated and who is out of the spotlight of student Congress, we would love to bring everybody in. I have never seen advocacy for athletes here. That's one thing I proposed that got shut down in the meeting. I think that's very important. I think Greek life with Joseph Goichai and myself, I'll yield. 30 seconds.
Ms. Ferguson, 30-second response.
I will say I definitely, in that meeting, supporting all students when you brought up the idea of supporting athletes. And I know a particular constraint for athletes is club sports. They do not receive enough funding for the amount of organizations out there and the support they need, and so that's definitely a goal of mine. I also know that recently we did create a different definition of a liaison, and so this would allow more organizations to have input at student Congress. And these positions did exist as representatives, and we just didn't hear from them, and I don't know, I can't much about that.
Mr. Mitchell, response, 30 seconds.
I'll say personally, if I feel my voice isn't heard, I will not speak. I'll say that. And I'll say that we want to advocate for RLA, our students there, making sure they have things. We also want to advocate for Greek life to make sure that those students feel safe and have regulations that keep them safe and active on campus. I yield.
Moving on to our next question, a specific one for Ms. Ferguson. This person asks, do the orgs supporting you include members from the current slate? 1 minute response.
From the current slate, as in my own slate?
Your slate.
We're definitely involved students, so we're involved in a lot of different organizations. As listed in my intro, I am involved in a lot. I would say that connections on campus shouldn't be discounted based on our relationships, because those relationships are valuable. how we get things done. And so I would say some organizations that we are endorsed by, we are involved in, but that makes a lot of sense because they know us personally and they know that they can support us, they know that they can trust us to advocate for their needs.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. Student asked question for both of you. What specific works of legislation have you introduced during your tenure at OUSC, or because Ms. Ferguson is the SAP chair, what works of legislation have you supported, been a part of during your time at OUSC? Mr. Mitchell, let's start with you. 1 minute.
Yeah, where do I start? I think the initiative, the Graham Health Initiative. Our slate has also been part of the pronoun pins, our OUSC logo competition, advocating for LGBT community there. Our Chartwell's task force, that's been a very big thing that we tend to, we're working on putting out more legislation to support that. We work with administration there. But across the board, I think I can't bring up every example across my mind, but we've definitely been a part of almost everything. Like I said, I'm a member of every single task force that Student Congress has to offer. So I love to be, even if a small part, to be a part of these initiatives because I do agree with them. And I think that they're great and our students deserve it. Hardworking people that will work for them.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. What specific pieces of legislation have you supported or helped with during your time at OUSC? 1 minute.
Yeah, so as I roll in SAFB, I actually am not very much of a legislative position. That being said, it's something that I find a lot of joy in and a lot of purpose in, so I've taken that upon myself regardless. A couple of things that I've done specifically are introducing the deficit forgiveness policy. This allows organizations that are using SAP funding to have a little bit of wiggle room when mistakes happen and when things that are outside their control happen that put them into a deficit. They would previously have not been able to function as an organization, and we saw this need that is a problem for students in my constant. I also know I was a part of the food policy bill, and so this made food more inclusive in our Congress, and we're hoping to push this even further beyond our Congress. And I also supported the safety resolution to increase safety measures across this campus. I do have a question for you. What bills, if any, have you written by yourself?
Mr. Mitchell, 30 seconds to respond to that. You were directly named.
Yeah, I'll say that mostly I've only been a part of resolutions and a supporter of that. As far as bills and allocations for money, I've more been on the back end in supporting our current initiatives and things and ideals and workshopping these things to come to fruition. So I've been a bit advocate, but as far as crafting my own bills, I haven't.
Ms. Ferguson, 30 seconds.
I will say that for myself, even though I'm not in a legislative position, I have written bills and I have been involved in the writing of others' bills. And I think that it's interesting as your position as a legislator that you have not. And I think that that kind of speaks to what may or may not happen under your administration in terms of getting things done, because when it's been your job to read and write legislation, it hasn't exactly happened so far. And so I'm wondering when that gets into gear, if that happens, if you're elected.
That's 30 seconds. Mr. Mitchell, response, 30 seconds.
When we talk about getting things done, I'll definitely say that when it comes to crafting my own ideas, such as Graham Health Center, working with the Chartwell's thing, Plan B, and things like that, I think these are monumental things that could definitely help all students. And I definitely, through these 2 semesters here at Oakland, have been a supporter and helped co-write and be a supporter of several bills and resolutions. So I definitely.
Ms. Ferguson, 30 seconds.
I just have a quick question for you. So we all know that you've been the face of this Plan B initiative. Props to you for that. I do have a question. Who exactly was the person that made the marketing materials for the Plan B initiative?
Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, so we directed that to a task force, and I worked with my president candidate, Joseph Goychai, and Mariam Farouki. They worked very closely and hardly on making those things to fruition while I talked with Ann Rayford and coordinated analytics and how we can further workshop this idea and make it help our students. I think it's very important, and I've definitely been a part of the process.
Moving on to our next question from Ethan Lehman Pace. He asks, how will your administration address housing issues at OU? This includes the lack of repairs and lack of support that housing students face when it comes to these issues. I'll also add, housing costs a lot of money on campus. So generally, how would you respond to this question, Mr. Mitchell? 1 minute.
I'll say the greatest I is someone who is in it, and someone who's been involved in housing, and, having spent maybe a month or two in Hamilton Hall, one of the oldest residence halls in Oakland University, and moving to Oakview and still seeing that we have elevators that go out every month as far as Hamilton Hall too, how we have consistent fire alarms that throw our kids and our students in the cold. I think these things are very important, and these are things that we have a personal touch and involvement with because we live there. Every single day we're here on campus and we see these issues, and if not, we know people who know these issues. And if not, if it gets past all of them, I'll say Oakland Student Congress has done a great job with instilling that student concerns fund, that people can pull and bring things to us that we do not see. Because we don't see everything, but I'll definitely see that we see a lot.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. How do you address the lack of repairs, lack of support, and the cost of housing on campus? 1 minute.
Absolutely. So I actually was a student in housing for the past 2 years. This year I'm now a commuter, so I kind of get a hand in both experiences, and I'm able to see a little bit of two perspectives. And so I think it's absolutely imperative that we focus on safety concerns, especially those that you're experiencing in the place where you're supposed to go home. It's absurd that you would be experiencing things that make you feel unsafe or actually put you in dangerous situations. That's not okay. And I would also say that it's important that we have a presence on campus. So even as a community student, continuing to walk through those spaces and seeing them from the outside. Oh, I'm not seeing this every single day. So what's standing out to me? It can be easy kind of to get used to things as they are, and so having that outside perspective that is familiar with how we still, I think, is important. Also, I know that having a representative body, including students that are commuters and housing students, is important to represent the entire student population. And also, prices of food are ridiculous, as I've touched on. It's absurd that we expire meal swipes and we don't get compensation back.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Another OU student, they ask, stopping East Campus is an issue which is frequently discussed. Does either slate have any plans to do anything with the area that was proposed for development, which is East Campus, for those unaware, that would benefit students or promote sustainability in any way? Mr. Mitchell, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, when I heard East Campus development, I'll say definitely it was a bad idea. And as far as sustainability and increased traffic, they had several different components that would have hurt more than helped. And I'd like to see the university step up and take from that endowment and invest in something that is not only sustainable, like our native reserve. I think that's very big. I was actually one of the first people to step foot on the land there. And I think that's a great thing that, I've worked internally in OUSC, met with the people in that committee to make sure that we have sustainable practices and working on things like that. But as far as specific ideas, I go back to us having our ears open and talking with our faculty, talking with our administration, talking with our students and organizations, and hearing what can we do.
Same question to you, Ms. Ferguson. Given that the East Campus Development Program has been suspended, what do you propose we do with that area that might benefit students or promote sustainability? 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, well, I think we need to listen to students and what they've already spoken and said, and that we don't want anything happening on that land. It's important that we recognize sustainability, that we give validity to green spaces, and in fact, I actually asked Vice President of the University of Anson and Westfall his question in a student body meeting. Like, what is the plan for sustainability? What is more sustainable? And he himself said, there's nothing more sustainable to do to this land than leave it exactly as it is. And that's the truth. And so, in coming up with sustainable options for this university, we need to keep in touch with the experts in the field and those that are really in touch with sustainability practices. And so, maintaining those relationships and hearing from them if there is anything that needs to be done. I don't suspect there is. I also think it's important to kind of touch back here. Mr. Mitchell was talking about the importance of East Campus development. I'm curious, did you sign the petition?
Mr. Mitchell, you're correctly named. 30 seconds.
Yeah, I did sign the petition, and I also did help flyer and engage our students outside to say, hey, this is terrible, we need to stop this. Like I said, my administration, we've been on the front lines as almost soldiers in making sure that these these students understand what's happening and that it's pertinent that we stop it before it happens.
Ms. Ferguson, 30 seconds.
I'll just say a quick sentence, just that he did not sign a petition, and that's a blatant lie.
Mr. Mitchell, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll say I definitely did sign it. I don't know if there's a technical difficulty, if it was, I don't know, sent in as anonymous or anything like that, but I'll guarantee that when it was sent to me, I saw this as an important issue and did sign it. And if I didn't support it, I wouldn't be out there helping Oakland Student Congress, further stop this East Campus development, because I do believe that this idea was not good for sustainability or traffic, and I think there could be better ideas for that.
Moving on to our next question from a student. They say, as an athlete on campus, we athletes make up a small but loud margin of students at Oakland University. We come from different ends of the world, most of us living on campus with no personal transportation options. A few years back, there was the Bear Bus that transported students from places like the grocery store and to sporting events. The question is there a plan to bring back transportation like that to Oakland University? Ms. Ferguson, I'll give you the first answer in 1 minute.
Absolutely. Public transportation is incredibly important in empowering our students to become independent and remain financially secure, and it's just increasing the support and engagement across campus of everything we do. And so I actually can say that our Vice President Ferguson, she participated in protesting against Bear Bus cancellation when it first happened, along with other members of our administration, and we do have plans to implement further the Smart Flex system by creating stable sources across campus where stops can happen. So that way, for those that don't know, Smart Flex is kind of like a bit of a cross between a bus and an Uber, but creating more stops across campus so it's more accessible as kind of a solution while we don't have the Bear Bus, even though that would be the absolute ideal solution.
Mr. Mitchell, same question to you. Is there any plan to bring back transportation options like we previously had? 1 minute.
Yeah, I definitely have a definitely interesting perspective on this. I'll say firstly, as a on-campus student here with no car, my transportation is my life. So I'll say if there is no Bear Bus, if there aren't, the Smart Flex option, I think, it makes it harder for us. But I go a little deeper into that. As someone who was formerly in a wheelchair for over 2 years, I understand that. I worked very closely with Charles to see why is our Hillcrest Hall dining hall closed on the weekend? Why do people who are disabled have to travel across campus to eat? These are very important concerns that we raise, and we might not be on the front ends and be the stars of everything, but we are definitely in the backgrounds working very hard. Yeah.
Next question. This one's directly targeted towards Mrs. Ferguson. They ask if you've been experienced and you've been so deeply involved in SAFP leadership. They ask, why is it taking so long for meaningful SAFP reform to be enacted? And it seems like the complaints have only gotten worse. 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, I can totally speak to why it hasn't happened immediately, and that's because if we're talking about confusion that students are already experiencing, the absolute worst thing that we could do is completely upheave the rules and change everything. It's important to do this before training rather than after training. And so, ideally we would be making adjustments constantly, and we have to the extent that we're able to without causing more confusion. And so, this is something that I plan to do as soon as elected, and going through those bylaws and changing them to be understandable, concise, simple, because nobody's going to listen to that 22-page document. I know it's 22 pages because I read it probably 7 times a day, and so I know it better than anybody else, and I know what needs to have changed, and I know how we're going to do it.
Mr. Mitchell, 30-second response.
I'll say definitely that, we are very appreciative of the work that our chair for SAFB has done. They've done some very excellent work here. I will say personally that I am a big supporter of making SAFB separate. I don't think that it is my role as vice president to rewrite SAFB bylaws. I think that it is my role to help reform and encourage, such decisions that we would like to see on campus.
Ms. Ferguson, a response, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would say it definitely would be your job as vice president because it is your job to manage the student body, and since the student congress oversees SAFB at this point, that would be your job. But in the meantime, the process of separating SAFB and ousc would be at least, I would say, a year long, nonetheless, very expensive process. What's the plans in the meantime?
response, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I do believe that, SAFB should be separate. I do not believe their influence should be directly tied with Oakland Student Congress. I do believe that we should work to give ideas, give recommendations, and as Vice President, it would be my opportunity, I would have to help rewrite these bylaws, but I would more try to work with our chair to not overbear them, but just kind of encourage certain decisions.
Ms. Ferguson, 30 seconds.
If you're going to work with an inexperienced chair, because I don't know, the student will probably rehire me, but why would you rather work with an inexperienced chair than somebody who knows what my lessons I now?
Mr. Mitchell, 30 seconds.
Well, as you guys know, everything gets wiped out, and a new chair would have to be elected through, after elections, and there won't be a chair there. So there will be no one, and we want to look for someone who's passionate about changing things and making sure that our organizations are heard and things are clear. We want to have recommendations, as I said before, but we do not want direct contact and influence over these decisions. I think it is the SAFB's responsibility.
So it seems to be that there's let me see if we can get to the core of the issue we're having about SAFB, since it's been a topic that's been recurring today. Mr. Mitchell seems to be concerned about the political influence of the president and the e-board on SAFB, while Ms. Ferguson seems to be concerned about accountability, how SAFB would be held accountable if they were to split off from OUSC. So we'll start with Ms. Ferguson. How do you avoid the president, the vice president, from having undue influence on the money that boards are getting? 1 minute.
Yeah, so in my experience in my education, specifically within HR and sociology, I come here every day on campus to study how to reduce bias and how to reduce disparate impact. And so I know that the best way to do this is to create clear laws, clear rules, and stick as very closely as possible to those rules, so that way everyone knows the expectations. And it's important that we have the system of accountability, because if things do come out of check, as you say, maybe it is the Congress's job to kind of rectify those things and make sure that they are held accountable. And I would love to hear your response as well, if you can work it in, what the plan is, if SAFB became independent from itself, how does it keep itself accountable when it itself could be the problem?
Mr. Mitchell, let me flip the question for you. If SAFB is completely separate from OUSC, how is that accountability maintained? And who does it? 1 minute for your response.
Yeah, I do believe we have a judiciary court where we do have a task of people in Student Congress who do have these meetings that are held for things that are denials and things about the bylaws that are not in check. I think we're going to have to put systems in place to make sure that they are watched and they are held accountable. But I'll definitely say that we need to put in a system where they can make completely unbiased decisions and not have the administration from OUSC working over their shoulders to make these decisions. Yeah.
Ms. Ferguson, 30-second response.
What you're describing sounds exactly what it currently is, where the Student Congress is still accountable, because the Judiciary Committee is part of the Student Congress. And so if your solution is for Student Congress to be involved, it would make absolutely no sense to separate OUSC and SAFB.
Mr. Mitchell, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I know a lot of bylaws were rewritten, and I'll definitely say if we separate these two, that we're going to have to do our due diligence with these work. We're going to have to make sure that we do put just paper in there to make sure that OUSC is separate, but they still can make these final decisions if we feel that unfair things are at play.
Ms. Ferguson, 30 seconds.
An important part of that, as I kind of alluded to before, is that, as we can see with these elections currently, the student body has input on who their electorates are and who's representing them and who is representing them in these situations with SAFB. And so the primary reason why this happens is because we want to give students that voice that they express through electing their representation.
Mr. Mitchell, 30-second response, and we'll move on.
I'll definitely say it's important that we put people in the SAFB that are very interested in making things unbiased and that things are watched after and our organizations are supported fully and understand the legislation that they need to submit and properly advocated for. I think these things are very important. Yeah.
Let's see if we can get to a couple more student questions before we conclude here today. Kayla Sharp asks, student wages have remained stagnant and most student workers make $10.10 an hour on campus. Would you support students organizing for a higher minimum wage increase, or for a minimum wage increase on campus? And how would you do so? Mr. Mitchell, let's start with you. 1 minute.
I'll definitely say we have a couple wonderful organizations that have seen this issue. They've started petitions that I've been part of and signed. I think these things are very important, and I think Oakland University Student Congress needs to work with this administration and pose those questions. Why haven't we seen a movement in the wage gap? Why haven't we seen these increases in wages for our students? We understand that tuition is rising. We understand that that things are getting more expensive by the day, especially with inflation. I think that these things are important. And I think that we're gridlocked at $10 an hour is completely ridiculous. And I would love to work with our faculty, our administration, and make sure that things are carried out appropriately, and that Student Congress is representing their students by speaking out against this and writing things that back that as well.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. Would you support students organizing for a higher minimum wage, and how would you do so? 1 minute.
I absolutely support students organizing for a higher minimum wage. Congress has done a great job of setting an example of pushing that higher wage on campus. And while it's not all the way to the 15 or even above that yet, I think we've done a great job of keeping things competitive. And this is something that we want to do even more of in the future. We absolutely support the push to raise the wage to 15. And we think that by holding other organizations and departments across campus accountable, the student workers and workers all over campus, no matter what, to raise the wage in general, because once we get bumped up to 15, unfortunately for the administration, we don't really like this, but they're going to have to start paying people fairly across the board.
Follow-up question to the topic of minimum wage. I heard a number from you, but Mr. Mitchell, is there a number that you think we should land on as a campus minimum wage? I'll give you 1 minute.
I think this would be a great question for a finance major. I personally will say that around 16 to 17 is a good mark, but 15 is a great starting point. That's what we see average. When you even go to fast food places around, the state, we see starting at 15, and these are bare minimum, wage jobs. And so we ask ourselves, why are our future leaders of the world held to such a lower standard than the McDonald's across the street? Yeah.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. Is there a certain number we should land on? And feel free to respond. I'll give you 1 minute.
Yeah, I think a very important part of our work here is that in a lot of these jobs across campus, we get a little bit more professional experience and career-based experience than you can get in some spaces like retail and fast food. And while these are certainly valuable jobs that deserve to be paid fairly as well, we also need to make sure that we're not in a disadvantaged position where we're making professional experience a privilege to receive on this campus. And so by making these positions paid more fairly and higher in general, we can make sure that students on campus are getting the valuable life experiences and career experiences they need to take themselves further. Because ultimately, experience in the professional and career world, that's leverage. And that's how you're going to earn more, that's how you're going to get a job, and all of the other things that we come to college to do.
Let's do one more student question before we move on and close out the day here together. This one's directed towards Mr. Mitchell, but we can expand it to include both of you. The student seems to be concerned that you do not have respect for other people's political beliefs, and they feel worried that if you are elected, you may not be able to represent those that think differently than you. The question for both of you, how can you guarantee students that are considering voting for you that you would represent them even if they don't believe in your political beliefs? Mr. Mitchell, let's start with you 1 minute.
I think if anyone were to ask me ever where my beliefs stand, I try to be non-political. I don't particularly like to stand in politics. I believe that our slogan, Stronger Together, means that we bring everyone, and that there isn't bias towards individuals or where you come from, where you're from, what you believe in as far as politics. I think we are completely neutral as Student Congress, and we don't look to encrypt certain biases and things like that. I think if you look across everyone that's running our administration, we have completely different beliefs. But we have a common goal, and we have common ground together. And that's what we look to find within our students. For you.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. How can you guarantee students that vote for you that may different political beliefs you'll still represent them on it?
Yeah, as you can see in our platform and across talking with us on our Instagram, one of the most important things to us is protecting rights as students. Whether that's the right to get an education safely, whether that's the right to speak your mind on campus without harassment, whether that's the right to read the books you want to read on campus. It spans everything. And so protecting those kinds of rights are really important to us. And, making sure that those are in place, make sure that we don't have bias, we don't have any kind of isolation of people that may think differently. I think inviting different beliefs and different thought patterns is nothing but valuable because it forces you to look at a different perspective. And it makes you look at life experiences that may be different from your own. And while everybody has their own personal beliefs, I think that, especially as a representative student body, it's important that we include everyone in the conversation.
Let's move on to one final question from the moderating team. For both of you, what issues, if any, do you think we missed during this debate that still deserve to be talked about on campus and on a platform such as this? Mr. Mitchell, let's start with you, 1 minute.
I'm a big person of advocacy. And the things that I saw this semester, as far as influence from the police department and the incidents that we incurred there, as far as harassing individuals, people of color, and there being, some sort of bias. These events were really heart-striking. I really had a hard time swallowing that. Understanding that, we do go to a school that is diverse, but these things are in place, and we do have individuals that have bias. I think one thing of just kind of alleviating that, working with our departments such as CMI, and just kind of working and bringing everybody together and getting rid of these biases and vendettas against our people of color is a very important thing to me.
Ms. Ferguson, same question to you. What topics did we miss that you think deserve to be talked about? 1 minute.
I think something that's personally very important to me is reforming the university-wide amnesty policy, or perhaps a lack thereof. As of right now, this university, if you are seeking help and you've been assaulted, or you've had an injury, or you need medical attention, or you need help from an authority, if you happen to be under the influence and underage, the university has the right to charge you academically. And this is just absurd. It's unacceptable, and nobody should have to fear that they're going to be in trouble for reporting something or for seeking help. And I think that is just one of the absolute most important parts of our campaign to me, is that we get that changed and rectified immediately, because it is absurd that on a campus that prides itself on safety and on health and supporting people, that we are silencing survivors and people who are looking for help. It is not okay. It is not okay to charge people when they need help. It's not okay to silence survivors, and it's not okay that this university thinks to stand for safety while doing this.
Thank you all for participating in all the questions. Let's do closing remarks now. I'll give you both 1.5 minutes, and after that, we will wrap up with some information I'll share with the group here today. Mr. Mitchell, 1.5 minutes, closing remarks. Go ahead.
I'll try to keep this short, man. I really appreciate everybody who's come out, and I want to give a special appreciation to our administration that has laid the way, that being faculty, that being just our janitorial staff, Everybody at this university works very hard to make sure that things run for all students here. And I understand, if elected, my administration has worked very hard to make sure that everyone feels safe, is advocated for, things are done fairly, the space in offices and our environment is inclusive. I think these are very big issues, and I'm very appreciative of everybody who works their butt off, and they don't get that every day, that thank you, or that I appreciate you. What you did, you didn't have to do, but you did it. Thank you.
Ms. Ferguson, closing remarks, 1.5 minutes.
I just want to say that I appreciate every single person in this room and those that are taking the time to watch this video, this live stream, because you don't have to be. You don't have to be here, you don't have to be participating, but you are anyways. And that gives me faith in the system. It gives me faith that the student body is not afraid to use their voice. They're not afraid to stand up and make sure that they are electing representatives that also listen to that voice and also make change based on the things that they hear. I know that in our time so far at OUSC, we've spent time building fantastic relationships that have gotten things done. We've spanned all across domains. We've made relationships and connections with all sorts of organizations. And because of that, we've been so powerful. And really, I just hope this is a thank you to the students that have been involved so far, because we couldn't do it without you. And it makes our job so much easier when you're able to bring those things to us and we're able to represent you accurately. I think it's just important that moving forward, we focus on protecting our future and empowering ourselves into the spaces that we came here to be a part of. And so in getting our education, we all want to be empowered and we all want to be heard. And so we want to make sure we're doing that. So please join me and let's keep moving forward.
Give a round of applause to both of our candidates here today. Thank you both for participating. It's a marathon, hour and a half. Give a round of applause for our lecturers here. Before we all go, the presidential debate will feature 3 candidates. It is tomorrow at 6 p.m. in the Bagel Hall. It will be an hour and a half. Bagel Hall